Okay. Now, next, we're considering a site plan modification for Meadowbrook School. To modify the COA for the school to use the soccer fields at 15 Farm Road and 18 Cedar for a day camp summer program at 10 Farm Road. Are you from Meadowbrook?
We are. 3 of us.
They're all from Meadowbrook. Okay. So there are 2 issues here, it seems to me, Joel. The first one is the COA, the February 25th, 2009 COA. Was that for the camp?
Yes.
Okay.
So that established the attendance. The board had reviewed the traffic control, the full kit and caboodle.
And we gave them how many years?
5. It expires after this summer.
All right. So.
And the ZBA issued a special permit a couple weeks later and had the exact same expiration. So both after this summer 2013 camp season,
right,
both our site plan approval and the ZBA special permit expire.
Okay. Now, here's the thing. I mean, the thing is that the soccer fields are somewhat problematic for the planning board, and here's why. Because when I'm just trying to see how much of a history lesson we go into here. Constructing the soccer fields involved removing about 30 feet. First of all, demolishing a building and removing 30 feet of a hill in order to create the level surface for the soccer fields. And that meant not only moving a lot of dirt around, it meant bringing the site down, and there was a lot of back and forth during the period when that happened about when the planning board would conduct a limited site plan review on the activity. And the work went on, first of all, because the building inspector determined that the limited site plan review was not possible for the planning board since the school did not identify a use for the work of cutting down the hill. So and then at the end of the earth movement process, the building inspector determined that the use wouldn't be established until people were actually playing soccer on the soccer field, so that the planning board never had a chance to conduct limited site plan review until after the soccer was actually being played on the field. So there were two issues there. The first issue is having to do with this is that the planning board was very concerned about the process, I guess is the way to put it. And in fact, 3 members of the planning board, the majority of the planning board, recused themselves out of protest rather than conduct limited site plan review on soccer fields where soccer was already being played. The board subsequently reconsidered, and one of the recusers decided to consider the application, but 2 members still recused themselves from the process. So right now, there's a question about whether the 2 members that recused themselves can now consider using this, rendering a decision on whether to consider this soccer field for part of the day camp. That's question number 1. Question number 2, in the removal process, the planning board's civil engineer calculated that 4,000 cubic yards of material, earth material, were removed from the site without a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. The school maintained that nothing was removed from the site at all. So we have a discrepancy between 4,000 cubic yards and nothing. And that discrepancy has never been resolved. And that issue was, again, part of the reason why a number of members of the planning board recused themselves in the first consideration, because they felt that the school was in violation of the earth removal bylaw. So now we have an unresolved issue in the earth removal situation, and we have 2 members of the planning board who recused themselves. And by the way, 2 of the 3 members who voted on the initial application are no longer sitting on the board. So now we have 2 brand new members.
Well, those questions actually are easy because the boards change all the time. The board is dead, the board.
Yeah.
So there's constantly no offense to people who are Asperger's or hexes or whatever. So that's really not an issue. And I'd say similarly, the recusals, let's be clear, were not based on a conflict, so they were fixable, for lack of a more appropriate legal word. In other words, if there had been a recusal based on a conflict, then you'd have to look at whether or not the conflict still existed. But the recusal was based on personal feelings about the process, if you will, for just very general terms. So as happened, in fact, at the time, as you just described, one of the recusers decided to participate, and I think I was asked a similar question at the time, and I said that person could do so because it was not a question of a conflict. So similarly, the recusers from back then who are on the board tonight have the ability to participate now. As I said, because as far as an old decision coming up for revisiting, you would have that all the time. You have a decision from 7 or 8 years ago where perhaps only 1 or 2 people have participated. So, I mean, it's a brand new question. So, in summary,
What about the removal problem?
All 5 of you can vote. Now, on the removal problem, I was trying to recall. So the end result was that a plan was approved and signed. The site plan was approved by the planning board. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Signed by 3.
Yeah. That was my memory.
But that issue was never resolved.
Right.
The calculations were provided to the building inspector to examine a determination, and no action was taken on providing that material to
And
the
at the
building inspector.
time, you said that now, see, if your position now is going to be that the planning board's voting on this was a ratification of the status quo, what you told us at the time was that the 2 were not linked, that the board could vote on limited site plan review without actually having that be applicable to whether the earth was removed or not.
Right.
And
that's right. Yes.
That's what you advised the board.
Right. No, and I feel the same way today.
So,
I mean, that's a separate issue, just to be clear.
But how are we going to resolve that? Because right now we have a situation where the board, at least we have information from our own consultant that the school is in violation of the zoning bylaw, and it needs a special permit from the zoning board of appeals to get right.
Well, my recollection is that that's, on that issue, just turning the clock back to where we were, however many months ago that was. I mean, that issue was left unresolved at the time.
Yeah.
And I guess it's really
It's still unresolved.
Well, an issue for the board is it an open wound, or is it something that
It needs a special permit based on the information we got from our own professional consultant,
depending
from
on
the ZBA.
Right, but
Or
there is
at least a determination from the building inspector, something.
Yes, I was going to say it's a factual question.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, I think, was the issue back then and remains the issue today. I mean, because I don't remember it as clearly as you do, but I heard both sides back then, and, you know, there was one contention that there was a significant amount removed, and the school's contention was not at all.
In their opinion, legally, in that that's an unresolved issue. Is that an unresolved issue that stands on its own? Is it one which clouds what we can do tonight with this application? Or, I mean, it was an unresolved issue. Hopefully it will be resolved. But does that prohibit us from doing anything?
When does it become relevant?
Does that prevent us from doing anything with this application that's before us?
Right, that's a good question, and no, it does not. I mean, that was, the question was before us, again, back whenever that was that did it preclude you from acting? And it was my opinion then, and it is now, that it does not preclude you from acting to review. I gather what's in front of you is a modification of the site plan.
No, it's a different site plan.
Okay.
They want to use the fields that then the other site plan permitted.
Right.
They're both Meadowbrook School, but one's
Yes.
the camp and one's the school.
So our
It's a
bylaw
different
requires,
Same piece of land,
Okay.
Same fields.
usage at a different time.
Oh, I see. The issue before was used by the school, now it's used by the summer camp.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm just, what I'm wondering is, at what point
Yeah.
does something that's that we believe to be in violation of the zoning bylaw have any meaning for our deliberations?
Well, and we did get into this last time. It's becoming clear, I think. It's a separate issue, really. I mean, it's a question of whether or not there was a violation. I mean, there is a factual question as to whether there was a violation. So it does begin, as you were saying a short while ago, that it begins with the building inspector. It's a zoning enforcement issue. The planning board is not a zoning enforcement agent. It does, through site plan review, certainly look to make sure the zoning bylaws being complied with. So if somebody wants site plan review for an automotive sale business in a residential neighborhood, you say, get out of here, it's not allowed use. This is a different, it's not a use issue, it's not a black and white question. So, I mean, getting back to the question I was asked a few minutes ago, does it preclude you, I guess does it preclude you from acting on this plan? It does not. It does not.
But at some
and
point,
should be pursued independent of the site plan.
isn't soccer a use? It's an athletic field.
Yes.
But the use is underlain by what we have evidence to believe is improperly undertaken. That is, there's a condition here that we have evidence, solid evidence to make us feel is not kosher, and so, I mean.
Well, I understand, but the use remains a soccer use at an educational facility. So I don't think, I think what I hear you suggesting is somehow a taint that.
No, I mean, it's not a legal soccer field because they never got the special permit for removing the material.
Well, again, I think that's an issue that needs to be resolved by an independent enforcement action by the building inspector.
Well, could we,
believes,
if we took action on this, could we condition that use of this soccer field by the camp on a determination by the building inspector about the violation of the earth removal bylaw.
Well, here we get into an exercise that we got into last time, which was taking up the zoning bylaw and looking at limited site plan review and what you can look at.
But earth removal is not part of those issues. Limited earth removal is a general bylaw.
Right.
And they're not exempt from that as under the Dover Amendment. So.
Right, but I think what you're saying makes my point that it doesn't fall within the criteria that you can employ in reviewing their site plan. I mean, in short, really what I'm saying is the two really should be separated. And that if there's still a feeling that there's a bylaw violation of the earth removal, that should be pursued independent of this site plan review.
Well, would be pursued by the building inspector.
Right, he's
Is that the authority to do that?
Can I back this up? When the determination was made that there was about 4,000 square feet, yards, rather, sorry, removed, I assume that Meadowbrook was notified. and-
They asked for a copy. They were
Right.
given a
And
copy
then
of David
nothing was
Conway's.
done.
No, a copy of that was all provided to Rob Moore, the previous building inspector. We actually had tentatively scheduled a meeting between Dave and I to review the calculations with Rob so that he could fully understand how that volume was calculated. That meeting was never finalized, and as we all know, he left.
So anyway,
Employment
what
for
I'm
the
saying
town of
is it
Weston.
just sort of
So no
got out of
determination.
everybody's
So
agenda.
Where is
It was
it?
out of sight, out of mind.
when
And now-
new building inspector was brought on board, he was informed of this unresolved instance when this application was received. I highlighted again, this is going to be an issue that needs to be resolved, and that's why the last paragraph in my memo on tonight's items, I mentioned that with the expiration of this camp, this site plan decision, and the ZBA special permit, if they operate a camp next year, we are the full permitting authority. So it's not only site plan, but it's also special permit. We're able to evaluate different criteria in approving that. And that one of the things that we could be asking the building inspector is saying, look, prior to any future application for this, we need a determination because we are not convinced that this is a compliant, this complies with the zoning bylaw.
And then what they have to do is go before the ZBA, correct? I mean,
Yeah,
how
but-
do we resolve this? How do they
Right,
resolve it?
earth removal would be by way of
Go
the
before
ZBA.
All right, and so they clearly don't feel like going before the ZBA.
Well, because no determination
Because
was
they're not really
made.
working well with us.
Right. No determination was made by the building inspector saying that they're in violation. So why should they appear
So
voluntarily?
how can we tie this in as a maybe, but first? You need to get moving on this.
Well, I think what he's saying is
It
what they
seems
can
to
come back
me-
and
it seems to me-
reapply.
But that's a year from now.
Yeah, I know.
That's a year from
It
now,
seems
so
to
they
me
can
you had a
wait.
meeting set up that never happened, that should happen with the new building inspector, and that take that track, independent track, to resolve this as soon as you can.
No, not as soon as you can, because we know how they work.
No.
So it's the
We're
town.
talking Joe and Dave and the building
Put it off
inspector.
forever, you know,
That's what
just
we're talking
put it
about,
off.
okay? We're talking Dave, Joe.
You're trying to make me rational.
I've never tried. So, I mean, that's the first step in terms of whether we go, how you go forward to find a resolution to it. And yes, it should be. This is like a year and a half old.
You don't think this has come up, David, in the last year?
I didn't say that, it's just that we
It
haven't
just-
taken that step, which is the next step.
So we need a 2x4 with which
And
to
Keep trying.
motivate.
And
Yeah.
the thing is that, we need something in writing so that if the board does not agree, we can appeal that because
Yeah.
Fine.
we need some
Otherwise,
sort of
it's not
rationale.
working.
Yeah, it's
So
not
we
gonna
can't
work.
do it until then. Meanwhile, we have this in front of us, which you're saying should be dealt with independently.
That's my recommendation, yes. Yeah, because we ran this circuit last time, looking at the criteria for limited site plan review, and this falls outside of it. And it is clear. I mean, it's not to the concerns that have been expressed. It's not that the issue is lost forever. It's just that there's a different path for enforcement of it, and I think it should be viewed as apples and oranges.
But after a year and a half, it seems to me like they've decided that it is forever, and if we just ignore it, it will go away, because clearly that's the message the planning board's sending, is like, maybe we'll get around to, maybe the building inspector will get around to it. So, I mean, I really like this resolve, and I felt very strongly about this, I'm sure you remember. And I'd like it resolved. I'd like them to get to abide by the zoning bylaws of the town of Weston.
There's no question it should get resolved.
And my recommendation would be that the request for determination is put in writing so that we have a date, we have something to actually go by, because...
You mean do it again? We've only requested it in writing 3 times.
No, as far as us sending a memo in writing.
We did,
Well,
the building inspector.
right, but we've
No, this
sent
would be
with
this would
the
be a
current
meeting
one with
the
emails
three of
and
you,
stuff like that,
building
but I don't think
inspector
that's bad.
making a determination whether he
Yeah.
feels that there is a violation that he can pursue.
Well, worst case,
Mhm.
we put it on the special permit. If we don't get any satisfactory resolution between now and next year,
Yeah,
it goes
that
on
would
the
at least
special
be
permit.
easier.
Is that
Special permit for what?
Next,
For the day camp. Well, this is a special
For the
permit.
camp, I'm sorry, for the camp use.
so the request right now before the board is for modification of the 5-year site plan approval to allow for use of this field this year, because following this summer, the permit expires. Both our site plan approval as well as the ZBA's special permit. So to operate a camp next year, they have to resubmit, because we made that zoning change 2 years ago, where the planning board is both special permit granting authority and site plan granting authority. We take it all in-house, so our authority over what we're looking at is increased above what site plan review is.
All right, sounds like it should be resolved before, within the next 10 months. And summer camps obviously need to know before May if the facilities available.
Okay.
will there be any change in the numbers of people?
No, the only thing that we're looking for is just the use of the fields. We're not looking to make any changes with the, our automobile ridership or our average daily attendance or anything else as part of the permit, just the use of the fields.
What about
There-
parking?
Parking wouldn't be increased or decreased because,
Are there going to be parking at the fields?
absolutely not. Absolutely not. Just in the parking areas. We don't have any need for any more parking or anything of that sort. It's just the usage of the fields for day camp activities.
Hours of operation?
Same, from 8:30 in the morning to 4, and then for the regular operation of the summer programs. And we go from 4 to 6. We have an after camp program as well. And when I say summer programs and day camp, I'm the director of the day camp, and we also have the maze makers, and the 2 camps together are the summer programs at Meadowbrook.
So all the,
What's the other one? Maze makers?
Maze makers.
Maze makers.
And how long does that go?
It's the same hours.
I just
Yeah,
single out.
I
identical.
thought you said after, there's an after camp.
We have an after camp program from 4 to 6.
Which has nothing to do with which camp it is.
It's for the summer programs. I mean, we're all one thing, really.
So
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we're really all one entity.
so all the same conditions from the previous 2009 COA apply, the same traffic control and all that. They just want to be able to walk the kids across the street to use the field.
There was one issue that I know you ruled on. I don't know if it was observed or not, and the person who was affected isn't here, because I don't know what's in here. And that was the grass cutting before 8 in the morning.
I thought that we resolved
That
that.
Yeah, you
that
were.
is in the letter.
You know, they said that they weren't going to observe it. Said to me, because it was too difficult. They had to go do it in the morning. And I said, why can't you do it in the afternoon? Everybody's done.
Well, it's a condition in the.
It's not to happen prior to 7 a.m.
Oh, okay,
That's our-
all right, 7.
that's our condition.
Well, starting at 7. I don't know, I'm just what I remember and what happened. Do you know if they observed that?
I guess they do. I mean, yeah, we're trying to be very vigilant about that.
So,
So, I'm looking for the 2x4.
there you go.
I mean, this is a limited decision, so, which is just whether to let these kids play soccer on a field that's already there.
On that point, I have no objection to that.
You guys have any questions?
Suppose the building inspector does say that it's in violation, how would that have an effect on our approval tonight?
None.
None whatsoever.
I mean, if at some point there's an enforcement action that needs to be taken, obviously with the property, and that would proceed independently, and it could have some impact on physical, if some remediation is required or whatever. It could mean something for the fields, but I have no bearing.
I think it would have a big bearing next year, though, if it weren't resolved by next year.
How do we send that message? I'm just wondering.
I think we just said it.
We did?
There are 3 people.
Via camera?
We've got a bigger team.
I'm not sure that we all have a lot of visuals with the powers that be.
Well, I'm a member of the Board of Trustees, and I will certainly take your message back to Steve.
Thank you.
And I move that we accept this limited site plan.
Second.
All in favor?
I
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, let's see.
How, you have to wash now?
Huh?
Did you wash now?
You're being filmed.
I know, I was